Hello everybody and welcome back to Weeknight Hero. As always, I'm your GM, Evan. So we're continuing with the Danger Room series, and after speed and movement really got the community talking, I thought I'd continue with another video that's mostly just the capper to put off on this basic combat series. After a lovely viewer reminded me that I still need to do my video on descriptors, I decided I'd throw like 3 mini episodes into one bigger combat episode. So, what we're looking at here are descriptors, power stunts, and hero points, and the very crucial role they play in combat. As I had mentioned in the Road to Character Creation series, descriptors are the adjective that describes where your powers come from and the general capabilities of them. You can have a descriptor that is elemental focused because you shoot electricity. You can have a descriptor that is magic focused because you can turn people into gnomes. What these things describe are the qualities of a power, and though they don't often come up in combat, they are crucial in certain aspects of the game. Mainly with things like the nullify power, the weaken power. If you're using a limited to certain descriptors kind of ability or an immunity to certain descriptors power. Descriptors are just how the power works. And the way that I would explain it best is in this role-playing game, it should be quite clear that if you're imitating a natural world, the descriptor should be able to realistically do anything it would do in a magical world. If you can manipulate water and your powers start with the water descriptor, obviously, I think that it would be an excellent counter to the fire power. I think even as a free action, you should be able to, create a glass of water for you to drink. I would find it reasonable in a team attack. You can use your water descriptor with somebody's electricity descriptor power. And when you perform that team attack, you're throwing water on the ground and they're electrifying them to boost the strength of the electricity. And while they come up very infrequently, even particularly in the games that I run, descriptors play a huge part in the way that power stunts work, countering effects work, and even how combat goes, just by the simple nature of you defining your power in a specific way. People can instantly recognize it and counter it. I'll give an example. Your character has that water descriptor power, and they are fighting an opponent that maybe they control plants. Maybe they can create walls of earth that absorb the water. I would consider those powers naturally able to counter each other. And because of that, it can present challenges in a combat scenario. And if you really want to test your characters, one simple way I would use to improve the difficulty of combat is just to present more unique descriptors, particularly ones that might be able to counter the descriptors used by your heroes. Like I said before, you're presenting a waist-high wall. They should be able to clearly see that maybe the main way that they're doing it isn't going to be able to get them over the wall, but they have the skills that they need already in order to overcome it. One of those ways being changing descriptors. Now, this is something that I often see go unnoticed in combat encounters. If your character has one specific mode of attack, in this case, maybe our water hero is fighting a character that is able to create plants or able to create earth in order to counter their powers. They have a number of ways that they can defeat it, mainly using a power stunt in order to change the descriptor of their attack. So, let's say your water hero realizes they can't hurt them because their defenses and their counters are too strong. Maybe they need to change the way that their power works in order to defeat them. As a GM, I would consider it completely reasonable that if their power has the water descriptor, they use a power stunt in order to turn it into an ice descriptor. It now enables them to overcome the plant defenses that the supervillain is creating. That's just one way that they can really introduce versatility to the character. Let's say that we had a character who's a martial artist whose main way of attacking are through unarmed attacks. And they are presented with a character who perhaps has body armor or super durability, which allows them to counteract the effects of this physical ability. simple unarmored attacks aren't going to be able to work. But if we were to think about it in a realistic situation with real people, if your character realizes they can't harm their opponent, they're going to adapt and evolve. So perhaps they change the descriptor over to the electricity descriptor. They pull up some power lines that are sitting around in the area and they shock them with it. If they have a immunity to maybe physical hits, but they don't have it to electrical hits, now they have a means of attacking the character that they didn't have before. And it just comes with a little bit of versatility. Now along this same path, if we're going into power stunts and the use of hero points and extra effort, both are incredibly important to figuring out the sometimes clunky mechanics of the game. Perhaps your character makes use of powerful ranged attacks and energy blasts. Power stunts represent that limited variability that allows them to change their power in order to adapt to the needs of the environment. So if their ranged damage power normally only attacks a single target, but they're presented with 3 enemies directly in front of them, there is no reason why they wouldn't at least try to hit all 3 of them at once. And it can be through any manner of, cone area damage or perhaps a line area damage where they now adapt the range of their effect in order to harm the opponent. And it goes in a similar direction of a speedier opponent. If you're unable to catch them, perhaps you want to throw in a power stunt which presents an affliction power which might leave them defenseless or might leave them prone or stunned, to your ordinary power that just represents you throwing in a little more extra oomph. Perhaps this water-oriented hero creates a field of ice that is so frictionless that now the speedster isn't able to move through the area anymore. So now you're able to completely cancel out their powers just by adding a little more versatility to it. Likewise, spending hero points or using extra effort are one of the ways you can overcome the system because it functions in a very turn-based format. Sometimes there are little fluffing that we need to do when it comes to dice rolls, because if your particularly speedy character just so happens to roll poorly on an initiative roll, now characters are able to get in 3 or 4 attacks on them, when if they simply did not have such a low initiative order, the entire combat scenario can go differently. And these are the kinds of things that you might want to take a look at as a game master or as a player, because there isn't a reason why you should have a poor encounter. If you wanted to include extra difficulty, by all means start with the lower initiative. But if it's something that a lower skill level player might find too taxing to handle, then certainly use these hero points in order to affect it. Seize the initiative, the perfect example of this being, when I was playtesting Songbird and Shrike, they were fighting some rather powerful opponents, and while this should not ordinarily have created so much difficulty for them, 2 or 3 particularly bad rolls from Songbird left them staggered, and on the next attack, they would have been staggered once again, which would have resulted in them being incapacitated, and it would have ruined the encounter. So what I did was I did use a hero point that I already collected during the playtest and applied it to immediately allow them to take an action. So they used the reaction focus of a hero point in order for them to immediately attack, and I had used it in order to trip the opponent that was coming up after me. So thereby tripping them, it did interrupt the action that they were going to take, and so now they were required to get up, which ended up using up their turn, and allowing Songbird to get out of the way, and allowing Songbird and Shrike to then defeat these opponents, which otherwise shouldn't have presented too much of a huge challenge. Remember, knowledge is power in these games, and so long as your characters and your GMs are aware of it, you can do a lot of smoothing over of encounters, and if you particularly have lower skill leveled players, this can be a way for them to enjoy the encounter and ramp up the excitement over difficulty that you didn't actually mean to have in the encounter. But that about wraps it up for descriptors, power stunts, and hero points, which I think are a great way to introduce some creativity to the game and also fluff over maybe some bad rolls that you did during the time, But thank you guys so much for watching and for participating in the discussion. I ask you to spread the word and stay tuned for the next video in the series. See you guys later.